Comrades, I am thankful to you all for inviting me to present this subject on this day. And today it happens to be the 71st birthday of Modi also. And in India, the Sanghis, we call the RSS Parivar family, Sanghis in India. The Sanghis are celebrating it, 71st anniversary of birth anniversary of Modi, they are celebrating. And so what has Modi done to India during the last 7 years? Or the RSS through its front organization BJP, whose representative Modi is, what they have done to India in these 7 years? Friends, 7 years of Modi rule, as most of you are aware, in these years, Modi has succeeded to almost destroy whatever positive things we could achieve as a result of the independence struggle against British imperialism and the 67 years of the post-1947 period. We had adopted neoliberal policies, and then the crisis intensified. It has transformed this. He has transformed this state apparatus and polity as neo-fascist by moving very fast to make the Manuvadi, Brahmanical Hindutva RSS as the most powerful political center in this vast country of 140 billion people. Many words may be Manuvadi, Brahmanical, Hindutva. These are all words I can explain later. All the details of the devastation under Modi and the pack of lies his establishment spreads to justify these crimes are available in social media. The statistics are also available in the social media. So there is no need to repeat them before such enlightened people, participants like you. So I will focus on RSS and Modi and what it means to the people of India and to the humanity. Because RSS is not properly discussed internationally, and Modi is still considered, or at least American imperialism is spreading the lie that Modi is a close associate of the camp. That is a camp of democracy, they claim. RSS claims itself as a cultural organization. It may be news to you. RSS calls itself a cultural organization. But culture of a sort. Yes, it is a cultural organization which is reviving Manuvadi Hindutva majoritarianism, symbolized by its Hindutva Hindu Rashtra concept. Hindu Rashtra means Hindu nation, which it has waged a consistent counter-revolutionary struggle against all progressive and revolutionary ideas, streams of ideas. It firmly opposed the Great Renaissance movement led by Periyar in Tamil Nadu, South India, Ambedkar, and other great leaders of the movement, and worked for strengthening the Brahminical stream, the caste system, and women's enslavement enshrined in the Manusmriti. Manusmriti is the book, the theory which theoretical book which Modi wants to make the Constitution of India. It says there is got no right to any property. They should always be serving others, and the women have got no right to freedom. That is going to be the Constitution of India if Modi is allowed to continue. It was founded, RSS was founded in 1925. Very same year, the Communist Party of India also was formally constituted, unfortunately. RSS copied all basic features of Mussolini's fascism and Hitler's Nazism. Even copied their uniform also. It integrated this European fascist stream of 1930s to Indian conditions. Hitler targeted Jews to promote his hate politics, leading to building concentration camps to massacre the Jews. In India, RSS BJP-led Modi already started building detention camps, starting from Assam, there are 1 dozen of them, to segregate and detain Muslims based on the Citizenship Amendments Act. A suffocating atmosphere is already created for the 200 million, not 1 or 2, 200 million Muslims in India. There are mob lynching and attacks on their business establishments, attacks on their family, and Muzaffarnagar like massacres. So these are all happening to terrorize the Muslims and maim them. RSS opposed the independence struggle and supported British colonialists. Hindu Rashtra concept of RSS was one of the points which provoked Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, to raise Pakistan demand. Both got strengthened with the support of British imperialism. Because British imperialism wanted to divide and rule, so they supported both, and with the covert support of emerging capitalist forces. The organization is in military style. Its central command is of frontline RSS cadets, mainly from uppermost Brahmin sections. It has formed front organizations among all classes and sections, and numerous terror outfits like Bajrang Dal, etc. It is RSS Parivar or family, RSS family, RSS with a large number of such organizations. BJP is just one of these organizations. Its political parliamentary front. It penetrates, RSS penetrates all political parties. Their agents are working in all political parties. State apparatus like bureaucracy, army, police, military, judiciary, everywhere. They are present everywhere. Because 75% of the higher posts are still owned by the Brahmin sections even today, in spite of all the reservation and other things. Though the Brahmins are only 7% of the population, they control 75% of all the higher posts. In short, RSS is the oldest, the strongest, and most reactionary terrorist fascist organization in the world. It has got links with 35 such organizations all over the world. In recognizing this real character, unfortunately, all opposition parties failed, or most of these parties led by upper caste sections also had such hidden ideas, sympathies. As RSS consistently stood for imperialist forces, leaders of other parties, like regional parties, to compromising positions. It was helped by Congress Prime Minister Narasimha Rao to destroy Babri Masjid. Now, flouting historical facts, at the same place, Ram Mandir, Ram Temple is constructed, with Supreme Court openly supporting the RSS claims. Our party CPML, the Star, analyzes neo-fascism as an international phenomenon today. If imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism, as explained by Lenin, during the last 1 century, imperialism has reached its most reactionary phase, neoliberal corporate phase, when not only the exploitation of human labor, but also the plunder of nature by finance capital has reached its most reactionary level. This is one question which is actually, unfortunately, not properly discussed by the international communist movement. Though imperialism is existing for the last 1 century, after Lenin, From the Marxist viewpoint, much studies were not made. Studies were made by the reactionaries, but from the Marxist side, in-depth studies, very few in-depth studies are there. So, though imperialism went through different phases very fast, they were adjusting to new situations very fast. The revolutionary sections could not properly analyze it and take lessons from it and develop their own ideology to that level. So the whole burden of the crisis is now thrown to the backs of the toiling and oppressed masses all over the world, intensifying all major contradictions. It causes people's upsurges. These intensification of the contradictions are leading to intensification of major contradictions are leading to people's upsurges everywhere, not only in one country, in so many countries. We had our Spring Revolt and so many other movements in 2008. Unlike fascism, which emerged in very few countries in the 1930s, following dissatisfaction to dictates of Versailles Treaty, 21st century neo-fascism is spreading fast worldwide, both in imperialist countries and in countries led by their junior partners. 7 years of Modi rule is the worst or best example. It has concentrated 73% of the national wealth in the hands of 1% of corporates. Modinomics and COVID have thrown out 250 million from jobs. And they joined the 150 million jobless already there. So we have got 400 million jobless now in India. The increasing natural calamities due to the ecological catastrophe. We have reached the level of ecological catastrophe because of the plunder of nature. It has aggravated the poverty and misery of the masses because so many cyclones are taking place in India, floods are coming, drought. So all these are throwing out more people to the streets, and they are mobbing going to the cities, and where they are living in the slums. The situation in India is explosive. For example, see how the ongoing 10-month-long historic farmers' movement is persisting with the possibility of spreading. In this situation, Modi has taken us to a very severe challenge. We have two tasks today. Either use all forms of struggle, including parliamentary struggle like coming UP elections, to defeat BJP so as to weaken neo-fascism, which has penetrated every walks of life. Work for the broadest possible unity of all forces opposed to BJP. We are doing that. In West Bengal elections, though our CPIM, Marxist Party, CPI, which is the biggest left party, belonging to the parliamentary left, they formed their own united front and contested all the seats in West Bengal, indirectly helping BJP to win. But we did not contest seats, except 1 or 2 seats where we had big struggles led by us. We organized a big no vote to BJP forum, and we campaigned intensively, in which the farmers movement also joined, and we could defeat BJP in this election. Though it is a ruling class party, regional party which won, we could avoid the victory of fascist RSS BJP in this election. So same thing we are doing in UP now. In UP, we are organizing a defeat BJP campaign with like-minded democratic forces. At the same time, continuing the theoretical struggle against alien trends. We have to fight against the right reformist parliamentary left on the one hand, and the left adventurous Maoist stream on the other side, and we have to develop a communist party entrenched among the working class and the toiling masses. This is the major task. So we are put forward a program of revolutionary left. So these two tasks we are taken. One is the broadest possible united front of all the forces who are against BJP. Second is the building of a revolutionary left, platform of revolutionary left, with a program, common program, to unite all these forces so that we can put for an alternative. If not today, tomorrow we can put for an alternative and challenge the fascist forces and all, try to create a new history. So today, the revolutionary left has got to put forward an alternate development paradigm, a concept of development. The present development paradigm, development perspective has taken us to ecological catastrophe. All the world are now reached the level of catastrophe. So it is very difficult to come out of it. So to reverse it, there are two possibilities. Either we succumb to the natural fury, or we destroy the imperialist system worldwide, so that we can create a new development perspective, a new approach to nature, a new relation between the nature and humanity can be built up. Which was this harmony was destroyed by the capitalist system. With the emergence of capitalist system, we started the plunder of the nature, and it has reached the dangerous levels today. So we have to struggle for an alternate development, a sustainable, people-oriented development. Second is we have to work for more democracy, democratization, so that all the power to the people, that power to the people slogan can be realized, which we could not realize in the erstwhile socialist countries, which was one of our major weaknesses. So democratization and a new development paradigm. These are our, with this perspective, we have to build a alternate revolutionary force, learning lessons from the past mistakes and struggling against imperialism and the reaction. And we have to defeat Modi forces in India, and we have to defeat neo-fascism all over the world. So long live world revolution, and we have to defeat imperialism with the socialism as the only alternative. Red salute to all comrades, and I conclude my presentation so that you can ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade, very much. It was a very brief presentation, one of the briefest we had, but you have summarized everything very well. It took only 15 minutes, and I think 15 or 16 minutes only. Thank you very much. Now we can start our discussion. Maybe they may be in the form of questions or just maybe in the form of your contributions.
So,
yeah, Kalpana?
Can I just ask, since you were involved with the emergency declaration under Indira Gandhi, and at that time it was highlighted as a fascist action by her. So has the Indian state and the politics developed since then in the 70s along the same line? So calling current government fascist as well, or has there been is there a sort of qualitative change from the structure of the 70s of the society compared to where it is now? And has BJP and the Modi government managed to do something which Indira Gandhi wasn't able to do in the 76 emergency declaration?
Yes, comrade, there's a qualitative difference between the two. So the 2 years of emergency rule in India, we suffered much. And the revolutionary left also, though we were sprinted by the time, we also suffered much. But our analysis is that was an aberration on the bourgeois democratic system. Whatever bourgeois democratic system was existing in our country, it is an aberration. A particular reaction of a bourgeois autocrat to a particular system, and in which she used the state, of course, but she could not convert the state. There was no ideological penetration of Indira Gandhi to convert the state into a fascist state or anything like that. It was a bourgeois democratic government taking ultra constitutional steps to keep power in their hand. That is different. That takes place everywhere in the world. But this is different. That's why I explained that question. The RSS is the oldest fascist organization in the world today. It started learning from Mussolini and Hitler, and started in 1925, taking lessons from Mussolini and Hitler, and then it is still persisting. It has become the biggest fascist organization in the world with 35 lakhs cadets. 35 lakhs cadets, 3.5 million cadets. And that's got nearly 3 to 5 or 30 to, you can say, 300 to 500 million followers in the different mass organizations and other things. So it is not a small thing. It has got immense funds. Without any auditing, immense funds are accumulated. All the corporates. Actually, 2013, BJP had having Lal Krishna Advani as the Prime Minister candidate. That was the idea. In 2014 elections, Advani will be put as a candidate. But all the corporates, Ambani, Adani, and all the corporates went to Nagpur, headquarters of RSS, and gave a memorandum to the RSS chief, Bhagavat. If you put Advani, we will not support you. But you put Modi, Modi has already established himself as a very monstrous fascist by his massacre of Muslims in 2002 in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, where he was chief minister. So he has got credentials. So the corporates wanted Modi to become the prime minister. They said, you don't worry, we will spend everything possible, everything needed, and we will make Modi the victorious. You put Modi as the prime minister. So Advani was, in place of Advani, Modi was elevated as a prime minister candidate, and 2014 election was contested, and corporates made him the prime minister. And so it is RSS functioning behind. It's RSS, Modi is RSS man, and it is fascism. And what is happening today in India? Some people say we can go back to the old situation. No. In 1977, when Indira Gandhi was defeated, BJP, the Janata Party came to power. There was no problem. The old bureaucracy, everything was intact. But today it is not like that. After 7 years of Modi rule, everything has changed in India. The bureaucracy, the army is taking orders from RSS now, army or military. Because one problem in India, 7% Brahmins are there. And these 7% Brahmins have got 75% posts in higher positions. They control everything. So 99% of this section is loyal to RSS. And through them, they are controlling everything. Judiciary. Our Supreme Court has got 25 or more judges. 90% of them are actually RSS minded. Supreme Court. So you can see judiciary below also. And so every field is influenced. Education. Now in 2020, a new education policy is declared now. Our students are fighting against that. It is actually the RSS. Our students also gave alternate education projects, but they were not accepted. They were all rejected. RSS dictated education policies implemented, so that right from the beginning, from the childhood, they are indoctrinated with the fascist ideas, Hindutva fascist ideas. And Muslims are presented as an enemy. 200 million Muslims are living in suffocation. Their mob lynching is there. They are attacked everywhere, including massacres. So the situation is such a thing. It is creeping up. That is, fascism is creeping up, and it has reached a very higher level, and so it cannot go back. We have to. There can't be any go back. There can be only going forward to revolution. There can't be any go back to old system. Old system which Congress had maintained, that is all almost changed now by the fascists. So we have to go forward to a new system. That is the situation now. So these two are different, qualitatively different. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Thomas?
Yes.
Thomas, you're muted.
Yeah. Yes, Naim.
Yeah, I think the couple of things, I mean, it's a very interesting talk you gave, but I'd like to know, because one of the recent things that Modi has done in 2019 is around Kashmir. So what do you think is the future for that? And also, what's the position of other national minorities within India? You mentioned the Muslims. But is there a national question in India itself that needs resolving? So can you throw some light on that?
May I answer?
Yeah. Yes.
Comrades, what happened in 2019, after 5 years of his rule, Modi got re-elected with a clear majority, big majority. That was in May 2019. Immediately he started an offensive. Modi with his Home Minister Amit Shah, they started an offensive. The first attack was on Kashmir. I think all the earlier agreements signed from 1948 with Jammu Kashmir government at that time, because Jammu Kashmir was never part of British rule. And it was an independent country ruled by a king. And so Britishers, when they divided the country and went back, they said Jammu Kashmir has got the full right to take their own decision. But after the division, after August 15th, there was a very serious situation there, and the Jammu Kashmir government had to sign an agreement with the government of India to, in the face of an attack from Pakistan side, to occupy Kashmir. So there was an agreement. From that time, there are so many agreements. All the agreements are violated today, and the Jammu Kashmir is reduced to a union territory, 2 union territories, Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh. Ladakh was separated forcefully from Jammu Kashmir now. And Modi was expecting that Ladakh people will support him. Now what is happening? In Ladakh also a big rebellion is taking place, but that is not reported by the media in India or at the international level. Ladakhi people are also rebelling, and Jammu Kashmir, the rebellion is complete now. Jammu Kashmir is totally alienated from India, especially the Muslim population. Vast majority is Muslim population. They are totally alienated. Mentally, they are not part of India. They consider us India as a occupation force. It is an occupied area now with 5 lakhs of military in the Kashmir Valley alone. It's an occupied area. And second thing, this is one area where the Muslim majority area is turned into an occupied area, and where young people are killed. Random killing is taking place in the name of encounter, calling them militants, jihadis, and whatnot, and saying they are penetrated from Pakistan. The young people from Kashmir who are opposing the government of India, Modi government, are being killed by the occupation forces of Modi. So nothing short of a national liberation of Jammu Kashmir will satisfy the people today. And that's why we support the right of self-determination. They should have the right of self-determination. They should decide their future. So we oppose Modi and support the people of Jammu Kashmir the right to self-determination. Another small area, I'll tell you how fascist Modi government is. There is a Lakshadweep near southern tip of Kerala on the west side. Lakshadweep, a number of islands, small islands. The population is very little, about 5-6 lakhs, and that is entirely Muslim population. Like Maldives, Maldives is to south of it, and Lakshadweep, 5 lakhs population, entirely Muslims. They have got their own culture. It is a very secular, very enlightened culture. You will be surprised. There is no police there because people live in harmony. That is the life of the islanders there. And there now when RSS man is put as administrator, and he has created havoc there. And he is creating havoc there, and he has turned Lakshadweep also into an occupied area now. So both these Muslim majority areas are made of occupied area. And so how systematically he is attacking. And he is opposing, he claims he is opposing Taliban. So one of our film writers, Javad, he said RSS is 100 times more dangerous terrorist outfit than Taliban. For that he is isolated and attacked. It's a fact. RSS is not only 100 times, it is 1,000 times bigger than Taliban. It is a more dangerous to the whole world. And they were systematically penetrating. And their theoretical book is Manusmriti. According to it, the oppressed sections have got no right to property, and the women have got no right to freedom. So this is the theoretical base of the RSS. So the question is, not only the Muslims, all the minorities are in danger. But what RSS is doing, RSS is following the divide and rule policy. The Christians are divided in India now. Christians have got an upper elite because caste system is influencing Christianity also. So the upper elite of Christians say that we are converted from the Brahmins and upper caste. So they are elite Christians. The others are Dalit Christians, oppressed Christians, who are converted from the lower sections. Modi has succeeded to win over the elite sections of Christians. And in Kerala, one of the major areas where Christians are concentrated, there the bishop, one bishop said, Islamophobia is the most dangerous threat to the whole world. Right? So he is speaking in the words of Modi. Modi is attacking Islamophobia, and this bishop is also saying the same thing. So that means part of this enriched sections, rich sections of the minorities, like Christian minorities, they are joining the RSS. But at the same time, the Northeast India, all the minorities, including tribal people, are alienated. Lot of tension is there. The AFSPA is imposed there. It is like a military rule in Northeast India. So one of the important things actually happened in India. India was a heterogeneous region. It is not Britishers which united India. It is a struggle against Britishers which united India. The nationalist feeling, the broad nationalist feeling, Indianness came through the struggle against Britishers. And now what has happened, that federal concept, federal principles and everything, which is not written in so many words, but it's the spirit of the constitution that is being destroyed by Modi. And Modi is destroying the federal character of India. And he is actually leading the country. If the fascists are allowed to continue in this way, India will be splintered. India will be splintered. People will be fighting for separating. And that is the situation being created by the fascists. So it is a very dangerous situation, not only to the people of Jammu Kashmir and Lakshadweep and other areas, but to the Northeast people and all the nationalities in India who are united through the anti-British struggle, but now they are actually divided by the Hindutva ideology of Modi, fascist ideology of Modi. This is the situation. So it's a very dangerous situation.
Thank you, comrade. Yeah, James.
Hello.
You're muted, James. You're muted, James.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is there any prospect of building any kind of unity with the CPI Maoist forces and the people struggling in Dandakaranya and what you refer to, I guess, as presumably the left adventurist tendency?
Yes, we are working on that line, but it is a very, very difficult task. For except because in India, as I said earlier, in 1925, RSS was formed. The same year, in a formal meeting, CPI, the Communist Party of India, was also started. But the Communist Party of India never took RSS as a danger and led a struggle against it. Again, the communist movement in India could not understand India because India is a caste divided country. It is a during the Varna system time, that is 3000 years before, when the Aryan domination started, they have imposed the two things: the division of the society into different sections for Varnas, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and they said women have got no right to freedom. They will be always the slaves of the men. So in that tradition, so here the unity of the toiling masses can come up only if the caste struggle and gender struggle are taken up as integrally linked to class struggle, not as part of class struggle. They are all linked because once there was class as such as we saw in Europe, that was not in India. In India, it was Varna, the caste. So the caste is class in the history. So we have to understand that thing. So that way, communists failed to understand this thing. And so when the Ambedkar and others, Renaissance leaders, led the anti-caste movement, caste annihilation movement, the communists did not join it or take it forward. So they got alienated from the real toiling masses, the Dalits and Adivasis, the toiling masses, and the agricultural workers, all these sections. So this weakened the communist movement. Another thing is, communist movement never tried to establish the leadership of the working class in the independence movement. They were always tailing the Congress leaders. These were inherent weaknesses which actually continued after 47 also. So very soon they became parliamentary left, and after Khrushchev came to power in Russia, they became followers of Khrushchev revisionism, and they supported Deng revisionism in China later. So they are actually hailing China as a socialist country now. Though we say China is controlled by social imperialists. They are not so much more socialist anymore. So in this situation, the parliamentary left, which continued that old heritage, which had strength in some regions, 3 regions especially, they had governments there for a long time. 34 years in West Bengal continuously, 25 years in Tripura, and in Kerala still they are having government is led by them, but still they never try to utilize the parliamentary struggle as part of the class struggle to advance socialist revolution. So the revolution betrayed. That was the condition in India. So that's why the communist revolutionists had to revolt in 67, but they also came under the influence of left adventurism. They also got splintered. So in India, there's many organizations, not hundreds, but many dozens of organizations, but with one dozen or two having some influence in many areas. So how to unite them? There the parliamentary left is actually implementing the neoliberal policies, and they even now they are not ready to say RSS is fascist, they say. But the Modi government is not fascist, according to them. They consider Modi as like a Indira Gandhi's continuation. Indira Gandhi's emergency is continued by Modi. They are saying that way. They are not seeing that neo-fascism spreading all over the world. So that is the problem with the parliamentary left. They are actually going to social democratic Muslims. And on the other side, we have got a section, the Maoists, who even now do not recognize the reality of India, and they take armed struggle as the only form of struggle. When the people's mobilization is the necessity of the situation. It is in this situation that farmer struggle has come. Farmer struggle has actually opened up a good discussion, opened up the ideological struggles, ideological discussion, and there is a polarization slowly taking place. A major section of the communist revolutionists may merge into a single party, and we are working on that line. We are working on that line, uniting for communist revolutionists based on a program. And we are presenting a new draft program for this unity. And we shall be sending it to you within 2 weeks or 3 weeks time. The initial draft of that program, we are distributing to all our friends also, India and abroad, so that they can also give their suggestions. So that way we are trying to polarize the revolutionary forces. It's a long, it is not going to be achieved in a single day. So that is why we say immediately the tactical line is immediately join with every possible forces who are opposed to RSS BJP and defeat them, because they are coming to power through parliamentary system. So they can, if they are removed from the defeated in the parliamentary elections, they will be weakened, and we can remove them from power. Removing them from power will create conditions for changing the system, taking the revolutionary movement forward. So that way, we are saying we are working for a broad democratic front, anti-fascist front, which is going on, and it is successful in some states, and now in UP, which is the center of RSS now, we are waging a big struggle in the coming elections. In February, there will be election in UP, and if we can defeat BJP in UP, then February elections, it will be a major gain. Modi will get a very big setback. Already his popularity has come down from 45 to 35%, and it's still going down. And so if UP we can win, that means UP we can defeat. As far as we are concerned, the communists are not in a position to win anywhere now. But we can support the anti-fascist forces, and the anti-fascist can win the election, and the BJP can be defeated. It will be a big change. Then it will help the development of the communist movement also in a new way. Rejecting the revisionist past, we can develop in a new way. So this is the agenda we are having. Developing the anti-fascist front and building the revolutionary left initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade.
If nobody's asking, can I ask another question?
Yes.
I think you mentioned the Farmers Union, the farmers' struggle in India that's taking place. Can you give us what the situation with that is, and what is the involvement of the left and revolutionary movement in that? So I think that would be useful for us to learn. So, and the other thing is Congress part of the anti-fascist movement, in your opinion?
The second I will answer first.
Okay.
Today we consider Congress is a vacillating force. It is the ruling class party, first main party of the ruling class for a long time, very long time. And it implemented the neoliberal policies. It led to all the neocolonial policies. So it is a vacillating force. And on the question of secularism also, it was compromising. It was using caste and communal politics for its vote bank. So with all these things, we consider it is not a fascist party. With all these things, Congress is not a fascist party. So today, the broad anti-fascist front means it includes Congress also. It is not an organization that way. The opposition parties are meeting, they are uniting, they are making some united front in states. Like that way, state to state, different type of united fronts are there. And most of the non-BJP parties are coming to the anti-BJP front in some way or other. So we have to consider in the present stage, the broadest possible united front means against fascism means all these forces, including Congress. That's one thing. But that doesn't mean that we expect that Congress can change the change or can bring this change. So we have to work for that. Second question is that first part of the question, the farmers movement. Farmers movement is historic, we say. Actually, it has opened up many things. It has opened up the possibility also. Because for a long time, after the Naxalbari uprising, the communist revolutionists were following for the principle, the left adventurous line propagated by China during a particular phase when Lin Biao was in control, that China's path is the path of the world revolution, path for Asian, African, Latin American countries. So all the communist revolutionists analyzed India as a semi-colonial, semi-feudal country with people's war as the path. But that situation, the situation has changed in India because for 1960 itself, the changes in agrarian relations took place. Green Revolution was started in India. And the communists did not recognize this thing. So independent movements came up, farmers movements came up in Punjab and Haryana, the center of the Green Revolution, the beginning. And there was a long struggle. Then the communists also joined the struggle. And everybody joined the struggle. And there was a big farmers movement in Punjab and Haryana. And they could get APMC, that is marketing and facilities, and subsidize the inputs and other things. It was a big gain. And the farmers in Haryana and Punjab are benefited. But what happened, after Modi government's coming to power, as a part of corporatization of everything, he has introduced 3 laws. If these 3 laws are implemented, it is passed now by force. If it is implemented, whatever gains the farmers of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP got, it will be demolished. And they will also become pauperized like farmers in other areas. This is the main reason why they started a big movement. And the movement is spreading now. In those states, the movement is spreading and intensifying. And it is becoming an anti-BJP movement also. So now our effort is to spread that movement all over India. So we are trying to, our present organizations, farmers organizations, with the support of the party and other mass organizations, we are trying to mobilize the masses, mobilize the farmers, and develop the farmer struggle all over India. And we are trying to mobilize the working class also to join the struggle, because working class also has lost everything, all their rights, and the 4 labor codes are created, cutting down all the labor rights. So we have to mobilize the working class also. We have to mobilize other sections of the landless peasants and agricultural workers also, rural labor force we have to unite, and the students and youth, and women, the Dalits, Adivasis, oppressed masses. So that way, a broad united front of all these sections will be better. And now slowly, the farmers movement, which is now 10 months old struggle, which is surrounding Delhi, and all of us, all the organizations have got their own tent, camp there, part of the mobilization, and everybody mobilized. So it is continuing in spite of all the manipulations and attacks by Modi government. It is continuing. So it is actually a big inspiration, like the citizenship amendment, struggle against citizenship amendment was a very big movement. Now, though it was suppressed using the cover of COVID, now the farmers movement is spreading and it is creating a very good atmosphere. In Uttar Pradesh, the farmers movement on the one side and the revolutionary left and other democratizations on the other, they are working together to defeat BJP. The slogan is the BJP. So in the parliamentary struggle also, we are using this campaign, using the influence of the farmer struggle. So this is a very qualitative change in the struggles in India. It has actually forced many people to make a new analysis of the Indian situation, concrete situation, and change the old dogmatic ideas and come to a revolutionary position. So we hope with the help of this developing farmers movement, the left movement as a whole will get a new spirit and new strength. That's the situation. It's a positive situation. Yes. Thomas first. Thomas?
Yeah, I'm waiting for questions.
Can I ask my question?
Yeah, please, Melvin. Melvin is from Dubai.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello,
Okay.
hello, comment.
Yeah.
Hi. I have a question basically. I see the CPM significance today is India. I don't see so much as happening except Mr. Vijayan ruling in Kerala for a second term. Beyond that, we lost drastically CPM from the space of West Bengal. After Jyoti Basu, nothing has really happened. Then Buddhadev was there. Then CPM is absolutely looks to be alienated from West Bengal politics. Now only left in Kerala, thanks to the Vijayan's leadership there. He's doing good during the pandemic as well as the last year as well. But what is the prospect for CPM in the rest of India? Because I don't see CPM is doing good enough in other states which are prominent as North India or Western Maharashtra, like Western India, like Maharashtra or beyond that. So what is the prospect you can see for next 5 to 10 years for CPM is concerned in India? Thank you.
Friends, I think regarding this Indian left movement, international fronts have got, because of the information available and the number of books available and the reports coming from India, there is an understanding, there is a feeling that the mainstream left, led by CPM led left front, is the left in India or the communists in India. Actually, the history of the communist movement in India, as I said, one or two points I mentioned earlier, during the anti-British struggle itself, it had lost its steam, its theoretical moorings. It had so many struggles in India, but it did not lead the political struggle of fighting against imperialism and establishing the leadership of the working class in the revolutionary movement. That was a criticism raised by British Communist Party, Chinese Party, German Party, and another party from Mexico. The 4 parties during 1935 wrote a letter to the Indian Communist Party. You are doing struggles, all right, but you are not leading the anti-imperialist movement. You are not establishing the leadership of the working class. So that history continued after 47. And within a very short time, they succumbed to Soviet revisionist positions. We should not forget about the international developments when we talk about Indian Communist movement. And even before the Soviet revisionist ideas came in 56, Khrushchev's speech, the communist movement in India, the leadership of the communist movement in India, had surrendered to the ruling class policies. They have become part of the parliamentarism. Not instead of using parliamentary struggle, they became part of the parliamentarism. They withdrew the Telangana armed struggle, and they left all the revolutionary movements they were leading in different places. They saw only election as only form of struggle, main form of struggle, or the central form of struggle. Then the split happened. Even after split, CPM was formed. CPM was formed, but it was bereft of any ideological development. It was a bureaucratic establishment, and the bureaucratic control in that party became dominant. And it was against the CPI and CPM the Naxalbari uprising took place. Naxalbari uprising took place when against a government which was practically led by CPIM in the 1997 in West Bengal, which was the Naxalbari uprising was suppressed by the government led by CPIM. You should remember that. And then in 91, they were in the forefront in implementing the neoliberal policies. Even within the Congress, many chief ministers opposed the implementation of neoliberal policies, rejecting the Nehru model. But Jyoti Basu went to your city, London School of Economics, where he gave a speech, that got a lot of publicity all over the world. He said there is no alternative to neoliberal policies. Tina, there is no alternative to neoliberal policies. He spoke there. And it was internationally published by the imperialists. And so he became a darling of the corporates. So he was Chief Minister of West Bengal. So he was in the forefront in accepting neoliberal policies. Neoliberal policies means what's the highest and the most reactionary phase of imperialism. Imperialism that ruled the last 100 years has reached its most reactionary phase under the neoliberal corporate rule. And that is hailed by Jyoti Basu as the only alternative today. And they implemented it, and they tried to take land from the poor farmers for chemical complexes and other things. So Singur and Nandigram, and they suppressed the people's struggles, and they got alienated and they got defeated. Can you call it the best example of Marxism? Just the worst example of in the name of Marxism. And so today, you said about Pinarayi Vijayan's government in Kerala. I am from Kerala. I started my politics in Kerala in early 50s. As a Communist Party member from 1955. I am a Communist Party member from 1955. Undivided party. So I know most of these leaders, and Pinarayi Vijayan's all seniors are my colleagues when I was in the communist movement. So the question is today, what is happening in Kerala? In Kerala, Pinarayi Vijayan is implementing all the economic policies of Modi. He has actually helped the Modi to transfer all the two airports to Adani in India, Kerala. And he has given the contract for the harbour building in Trivandrum, which is ecologically very devastating to Adani, because he is helping the corporatization very much. So he is part of the Modi scheme of corporatization. He is implementing the policies, economic policies faithfully. Firstly. Secondly, if you take the democratic aspect, CPM opposed UAPA all over India, or they claim to oppose. But in Kerala, we are having 800 UAPA prisoners. Do you know about it? We are having 800 UAPA prisoners in Kerala. And so even students, they are working, part of their students' organization under suspicion, in spite of the High Court saying that you cannot call everybody reading a Marxist book a Maoist. They are called Maoists, and they are put under the UAPA. Young boys, they are put under the UAPA. This is the situation. In the name of suppressing the Maoists, there are fake encounters during Pinarayi's government, and 8 Maoists were killed. We are fighting Maoists theoretically. We say they are left dangerous. But that doesn't mean that they have got the democratic right. They have the democratic right to spread their ideas. But according to rule of law, if they violate the rule, if you can do things legally, it's okay. But what right you have got to kill them and fake encounters? Pinarayi Vijayan did it. So the question is, friend, the Pinarayi Vijayan government is not a Marxist government, or he has got no any relation with Marxism. Now, what they are doing, they are actually creating conditions for BJP to come up now, indirectly. They are creating conditions for saffronization of Kerala. What happened? Kerala is a state where 55% Hindus, 25% Muslims, and 20% Christians. So, among the Hindus, the upper castes are already supporting the RSS. And now the rich sections in the lower caste, OBC, other backward castes also are joining the RSS. Even some Dalit sections are also joining the RSS. And now Christian, upper caste Christians are also joining RSS. So in this way, the RSS constituency is expanding. RSS is working that way. RSS, it is not the BJP's votes now. The RSS penetration. RSS is controlling practically everything, including the police, state police. One of the partners of the government in Kerala, CPI, his General Secretary's wife, she is of course Central Committee member, Ani Raja. Ani Raja is a Central Committee member of CPI and partner of CPI General Secretary D. Raja. She went to Kerala. She is the leader of the women's movement also. She went to Kerala and she made a study of the criticisms against the police, and she made a statement that Kerala police is working under RSS. She was abused like anything. She was attacked, and the Kerala state committee of the CPI also attacked her because they want to remain in power. The Central Committee is supporting her. The State Committee is opposing her. But what Ani Raja said is a fact. It is proved through the Sabarimala question and other question that Kerala government's police is controlled by RSS. The earlier DGP, who is given another post now by Pinarayi Vijayan, he was in DGP for 5 years. When the first term of Pinarayi, he was an RSS man. He was actually one of the senior police officers in Ahmedabad when the massacre of the Muslims took place. He was very close to Modi. And actually it is Amit Shah's nomination which helped him, which helped promote support, which helped, which actually forced Pinarayi to accept him as the DGP in Kerala. The question is that these are not accusations, these are facts. You can verify. So this revisionist party, no revisionist party anywhere in the world has made any headway. We have seen the history of Afghanistan also. When such a good opportunity was there in the 1970s, how they spoiled the opportunity. And same thing happening all over the world. Revisionists cannot redeem Marxism. Revisionists only degenerate further and try to regenerate Marxism also that way, their own way. So the question is, Pinarayi Vijayan is no more communist. And Kerala and India, the CPM is a social democratic party implementing the Modi's policy. And they are not even opposing their party as a party. CPM's position is still the CPM is following the Prakash Karat's paper on fascism. Prakash Karat, earlier General Secretary, two-time General Secretary, he has published an article about a few years back when the criticism against RSS and Modi government was intensifying and they were called fascists. Karat wrote an article in which it is said, you can go through the article, please. And that he said, it is also a bourgeois democratic operation, like in emergency. What is happening is like emergency. He compared the Modi rule with the emergency, which is fundamentally wrong. That means he is far away from Marxist analysis of the development. So this is this party, CPM, is accepting that, not rejected that paper. Still, they are uploading that paper. They consider that the Modi government is not fascist, but it is the worst example of neo-fascism all over the world. There are about 45 countries under neo-fascist influence now, and India is the worst example. And they have reached everywhere. Even the governments, even the states where the opposition parties are ruling, they are controlling the police and they are controlling the bureaucracy. And through that way, they are penetrating. And through this, by destroying federal concepts, They are actually taking over the state's rights. All these are happening. And then how can we call CPM the Marxist party? And in Tripura, they were 25 years in power. Then BJP defeated them in election. 25 years in power. Then BJP defeated them in election. And they said because of BJP's criminal activities, we were defeated. How can it happen? The police and everything, administration was under your control when the election took place. How can you say because of criminal activities of BJP you are defeated? Definitely BJP is a criminal, fascist. But that is one aspect. But you got alienated from the people because of neoliberal policies. The same thing happened in Bengal. 34 years of power. How can you say Trinamool Congress attacks defeated you? Because when CPM itself was in power, they have attacked everybody. They have decimated everybody. Our own forces, CPML forces in West Bengal, all of them were attacked. Many were killed during CPM's rule. So CPM rules, most of the anti-social elements were accumulated by them. And all these forces slowly started shifting to Trinamool Congress when they came to power. It is not because of that Trinamool came to power, because of CPM alienating from the people, they came to power. She came to power. The Trinamool Congress could win in 2011. It is because of the alienation of the CPM from the masses to the Nandigram and other struggles. So the question is, India, we cannot expect that the parliamentary left is going to change. Parliamentary left is degenerating, decimating, decimated. In West Bengal, it had 6.5 lakhs members, active members, according to the last party Congress report. But today, how much is left? Very little is left. They had 55% parliamentary votes in West Bengal elections. More than 50% at least in 4 elections. But now it has reduced to 4%. Left front voting percentage, it is 4% in this recent election. How devastating is the decimation? You can see. Where these carriers went, where the activists went, to the BJP, not to TMC. Some people went to TMC, but most of the people went to BJP. This is the situation. So the question is, revisionism is not the, revisionist forces cannot save the world. Only the revolutionary forces can save the world. We have to work for recreation of the revolutionary parties. That is our answer. That is our analysis of the situation. We can have a detailed discussion of CPM politics. Because I was also very, 1964 split time onwards, I was also associated with the party. I know it very well. And so we can have a long discussion on the CPM's governments and CPM's policies and CPM's theoretical positions.
Thank you.
I hope our comrade will.
Yeah, we can think of a discussion in the future.
Yes.
In an earlier meeting, we had invited Rajesh Cheria to discuss about CPIM in Kerala.
Yes.
We can have a future discussion from CPML's point of view.
Yes. You can send me the report of that discussion, and so we can.
Yeah. I can send it. I think I have recorded it.
Well, I can intervene, or comrade PJ James can. It will be better if PJ James can intervene.
Yeah.
PJ James will be in Kerala, so he will be most up to date questions.
Yeah, correct.
Any further questions?
Any further questions? Only 5 minutes more for 8:30. I thought of winding up at 8.
Am I clear and audible?
Yes, to me it was very clear. Though only we are here, this many people, this will be recorded and it will be shared among our others who could not be present. Surendra, you want to ask any questions?
No, thank you. I'm all right.
Okay, then shall we wind up? Shall you wind up?
Thank you then.
Thank you,
And-
Comrade Ken.
Thank you all the comrades for
Thank you.
giving me an opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question with the, there's a protest outside JD Sports tomorrow, 1 to 3 for Palestine, for Puma. Is